The cabin stood alone in the middle of the dense forest, its wooden walls weathered by years of harsh winters and scorching summers. It was a place of solitude, retreat for its owner, Ethan, who had grown tired of the noise and chaos of the city. He had built the cabin with his own hands, a sanctuary where he could escape the world and find peace. But peace was the last thing he would find on this particular night. Ethan had just finished chopping firewood when he noticed something strange. The air felt heavier, charged with an energy he couldn't explain. The birds had stopped chirping, and the usual rustling of leaves in the wind had ceased. It was as if the forest itself was holding its breath. He shrugged it off, attributing it to the approaching storm, and carried the firewood inside. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the cabin was bathed in the warm glow of the fireplace. Ethan sat in his favorite armchair, a book in hand, trying to shake off the unease that had settled in his chest. He was halfway through a chapter when he heard it, a faint, almost imperceptible sound, like the soft rustle of fabric. He froze, his eyes darting toward the source of the noise. It came from the corner of the room, near the old wooden wardrobe. "Hello?" Ethan called out, his voice steady but laced with caution. There was no response. He stood up, his heart pounding, and slowly approached the wardrobe. The sound had stopped, but he could have sworn he saw a shadow move behind it. He reached for the handle, his fingers trembling slightly, and yanked the door open. Nothing. The wardrobe was empty, save for a few old coats and a pair of boots. Ethan let out a breath he didn't realize he was holding and shook his head. "Get a grip, Ethan," he muttered to himself. "You're hearing things." But as he turned back to his chair, he caught a glimpse of something out of the corner of his eye, a faint, shimmering light near the window. It was gone in an instant, but it was enough to make his skin crawl. He grabbed the flashlight from the table and scanned the room, but there was nothing there. He decided to call it a night, hoping that sleep would clear his mind. Unbeknownst to Ethan, he was not alone in the cabin. Hidden in the shadows, a figure watched him with cautious curiosity. She was not human, though her appearance was deceptively similar. Her skin had a faint, iridescent glow, and her eyes were a deep, otherworldly violet. She had been on Earth for only a few days, sent on a mission to observe and study its inhabitants. Her name was Lyra, and she had chosen Ethan's cabin as her temporary base. Lyra had been careful to remain hidden, using her advanced technology to cloak herself from human sight. She had watched Ethan from the moment he returned to the cabin, fascinated by his routines and the way he interacted with his environment. But tonight, she had made a mistake. The storm outside had disrupted her cloaking device, causing it to flicker momentarily. That was the shimmer Ethan had seen. She pressed herself against the wall, her heart, or the alien equivalent, racing. She had been trained for this, taught how to remain undetected, but she had never been this close to a human before. There was something about Ethan that intrigued her. He seemed different from the others she had observed, kinder, more introspective. She couldn't help but wonder what it would be like to speak to him, to learn about his world from his perspective. But that was against the rules. Her mission was clear: observe, record, and report. No contact. No interference. The next morning, Ethan woke up feeling restless. The strange occurrences from the night before lingered in his mind, and he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. He decided to spend the day outside, hoping that the fresh air and physical labor would help clear his head. As he worked in the garden, Lyra watched him from the safety of the trees. She had repaired her cloaking device, but she couldn't resist staying close. There was something about the way Ethan moved, the way he cared for the plants and animals around him, that drew her in. She had seen humans destroy their environment, but Ethan was different. He was a caretaker, a protector. That evening, as Ethan sat by the fire, he heard the sound again, a soft rustling, this time coming from the kitchen. He stood up, his nerves on edge, and grabbed the flashlight. He moved slowly, his senses heightened, and peered into the kitchen. At first, he saw nothing. But then, out of the corner of his eye, he noticed a faint shimmer near the counter. "I know you're there," he said, his voice firm but not threatening. "Whoever, or whatever, you are, you don't have to hide." For a moment, there was silence. Then, the air seemed to ripple, and Lyra appeared before him. Ethan stumbled back, his flashlight slipping from his hand and clattering to the floor. He stared at her, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. She was beautiful, but in a way that was almost unsettling. Her violet eyes glowed softly, and her skin seemed to shimmer in the dim light. "I mean you no harm," Lyra said, her voice melodic and soothing. "I am here to observe, not to interfere." Ethan's initial shock gave way to curiosity. "Observe? Observe what?" "Your world," she replied. "Your species." "I am a visitor." Ethan took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. "So you're an alien?" Lyra nodded. "In your terms, yes." They stood in silence for a moment, each studying the other. Ethan's fear began to fade, replaced by a sense of wonder. "Why me?" he asked. "Why my cabin?" "You are different," Lyra said simply. "You care for this place. You respect it. That is rare among your kind." Ethan didn't know how to respond. He had always felt a deep connection to nature, but he had never thought of it as something extraordinary. "What happens now?" he asked. Lyra hesitated. "I should leave. My presence here is a violation of my mission." "But you don't want to," Ethan said, sensing her reluctance. She looked at him, her expression unreadable. "No, I do not." Over the next few days, Ethan and Lyra developed an uneasy but fascinating rapport. She shared stories of her world, of its advanced technology and its struggles with environmental collapse. He, in turn, told her about Earth, its beauty and its flaws. They spent hours talking, learning from each other, and slowly, a bond began to form. But Lyra knew it couldn't last. Her superiors would soon notice her prolonged absence and come looking for her. She had already stayed too long. One evening, as they sat by the fire, Lyra turned to Ethan. "I must go," she said softly. "My time here is over." Ethan felt a pang of sadness. He had grown accustomed to her presence, to the way she made him see the world in a new light. "Will I ever see you again?" he asked. Lyra smiled, a bittersweet expression. "Perhaps. But if I do, it will not be like this. My mission will be over, and I will no longer be bound by its rules." She stood up and walked to the door, her form beginning to shimmer as her cloaking device activated. Ethan followed her, his heart heavy. "Thank you," he said, "for showing me that there's more to the universe than I ever imagined." Lyra reached out and touched his hand, her skin warm and soft. "Thank you, Ethan, for reminding me that even in the darkest places, there is light."